Well, that's good. I'm Charlie O'Connor here with PHLY Flyers. Obviously, our director of fun and games, Bill Matz, is not here today, but I have for you one Kelly Hinkle of Broad Street Hockey. Kelly, thank you for joining us today.
In the Bill seat, which always makes me nervous.
In the Williams seat.
Yeah. I'm not used to, it's this weird thing where I can't be on this side of you.
Okay.
It makes me uncomfortable. I have to be on the other side of you. But I'm going to make it work. I'm going to do Bill proud.
Okay.
That's the goal.
And this isn't even going to be the only time. We're doing this again tomorrow.
We're doing it tomorrow.
Yeah. It's a 2-day Charlie and Kelly show.
Apologies in advance to the watchers.
Do not apologize. It is going to be fantastic.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
And we have a lot to talk about.
We do.
We have Flyers stuff to talk about. There was another game last night. They have now played 2 preseason games. And it appears that the first round of roster cutdowns are imminent. They have not yet been announced. They could potentially be announced while we are on the show. So we shall see how that goes. But to kick things off, let's talk about the preseason game that happened last night in Montreal. Game 1 on Sunday went real well.
Real good.
Real,
a lot of fun.
Real good. 6-2, strong performance by basically all the important players. Last night's game, not so much.
Watching that game was a real slog, Charlie.
So did you also watch the stream with no commentators?
Yeah.
Yes.
So no commentators. Which I know a lot of people say that they kind of like that. Like it kind of feels like you're in the rink, you hear the game sounds, and like all that stuff is true. But also, like I have a bird brain, and so I find that at home where there are so many distractions, I need Jim Jackson or Tim Saunders telling me what to pay attention to.
You need them to keep you tethered to reality.
Me, yes.
Right.
At the game, it's easy. You're there. You're sitting there. You're watching it. You see all the things. At home, with nothing happening, it was just like my brain was just like drifting constantly. And it didn't help that the game was kind of boring and ultimately not very good.
I think that was my problem.
Yeah.
If it was a regular season game that had actual stakes, I think it would have been much easier for me to stay intently focused on the action.
Yes.
Because it was a preseason game, and not only a preseason game, but a preseason game with no Michkov, no Luchanko. Like, none of the really fun young guys were in this game. So it wasn't even like you were watching to wait for the next Michkov shift.
Right.
Like, oh, that's something to pay attention to.
No.
Instead, just like, oh, there's Elliott Desnoyers.
Nah.
Oh, cool. There's,
I wish he'd do something.
There's Risto again. There's Igor Zamula, who actually didn't have a bad game. But
oh, look, it's Ronald Attard
Ronald
again.
Attard doing Ronald Attard things.
Doing
which
things.
On this night, we're not good. But we will get to that.
Yes.
But I do want to go through real quick just the general game itself. They lose 5-0. Couple things I do want to point out, though. Number one, it should not have been a shutout. Sean Couturier did score a goal in the first period. Like, that happened. They blew it dead because they didn't realize that it was already in the net when Anthony Richard pushed the goalie's pad a little bit. That was a goal. So in my mind, Sean Couturier has scored.
It's preseason for everybody,
He scored
Charlie.
a preseason goal.
Yeah.
The NHL may say it didn't happen. I say it happened, and that's all that matters.
The refs
so really,
gotta ease in.
really, it was a 5-1 game.
Yeah.
And if you give them that goal, in reality, it was a 1-1 game going into the third period, which is when the wheels fell
Changes
off.
everything.
And it wasn't like by the score sheet they got killed, aside from by the goals. You know, they got outshot 26-25. It's not like they got obliterated from a territorial standpoint. They lost the expected goals battle 2.81 to 1.81. Again, deserved to lose, but it wasn't as if they got obliterated. They were the not as good team on paper, and they lost the game. It was just that they lost the game by a significant goal differential. So how did they get blown out?
What happened in the third period, Charlie?
Well, one thing that happened in the third period was there was a new goalie in there. Now, Cal Petersen, in fairness, did play the back half of the second period as well.
Yeah.
But
he went full Cal.
I'm not going to blame it entirely on Cal, but he did go full Cal.
He went full Cal Petersen. He gave us the full Cal Petersen experience. He reminded all of us that if we need to call up a goalie from the Phantoms this year, it's gonna be fun.
I think the person who probably benefited the most from this game was Eetu Mäkiniemi, who was the guy who played the first half of the game. It's funny, he still has the like San Jose color mask, which is very funny because he used to be in that organization. But I thought in the beginning of the game, he had a really, really bad misadventure behind the net where he almost gives up a goal because he just basically misplays the puck. and you're thinking, oh boy, this is going to be rough. And then the rest of the 30-ish minutes he played, I thought he was fine.
So I know we're not explicitly talking about Sunday's game, but since I wasn't here yesterday and we're talking about goaltending, I thought Mäkiniemi looked better to me than Ivan Fedotov.
So we had this conversation on the show yesterday.
I missed yesterday's show.
About the fact that I was at the game and I didn't think Fedotov looked terrible. I thought he probably could have stopped the second goal. First goal goes off Nick Seeler, whatever. That's just bad luck. Yeah. Second goal, probably could have done a better job fighting through screens, but I didn't see anything terribly concerning because I'm mostly watching the skaters.
Right.
I'm not watching the goalie quite as intently as maybe it shows up on video, because at all times you can watch the goalie if you want to.
Yeah.
It seemed like the people that watched on television came away very, very concerned with Fedotov because he just didn't look good.
Yes, that's what it was. So, like, to be fair, I was paying more attention to him than I would a normal goaltender on a normal day. Just because I think there's so much about this season is hinging on the goaltending being at least not a disaster. And a lot of that is going to involve him being not a disaster so that Ersson can get as many nights off as possible. So I was very invested in seeing him play this game. And I agree with you that the goals really weren't the problem. Like, it wasn't a Cal Petersen situation where it didn't look like he knew how to play goalie in professional hockey. But, like, he never looked like, you know how, and I hate to bring up Carter Hart, but remember the Carter Hart experience? You always, when you watched him, you always knew he's always square to the shooter. You can always see that he's tracking the puck well. True. He always seemed to anticipate where he needed to be ahead of needing to be
From
there.
a technical standpoint, Carter Hart was about as sound as you can get.
Ivan Fedotov did not look like that. Like, in my mind, he never looked like he was square to the shooter. He always looked like he was scrambling to get where he needed to be. He never looked like he was tracking the puck well. It always looked like his angles were off. And it made me nervous because I remember you telling me last season, or when he came over the summer, that he has played games on a North American-sized rink before. Yeah, like, obviously, he's also played games on the international side, but it's not like he's never
The KHL, it really varies from team to team. Some teams have the NHL-sized rink. Some teams have the international-sized
So, like,
rinks.
I'm definitely willing to give him, like, okay, maybe it was nerves. Maybe he's still learning the angles. Like, all of that kind of stuff. It just made me feel less sure about the goaltending than I was talking myself into being before watching that game.
So here is what I'll say to that. And you might be 100% right that Fedotov, ultimately, this is a sign of a guy who just is not good enough to be in the NHL. But you compare him to Carter Hart, and I think that's a really interesting comparison because one of the reasons why Carter Hart had to become the goalie prospect and the quality NHL goalie he ultimately became, one of the reasons why he had to be that technically sound and that good at all the angles is because relative to what NHL teams right now want in goalies, he was relatively small. Ivan Fedotov is enormous.
No, he's big.
So I wonder, and again, you might be right that this was a harbinger of things to come about Fedotov just not having it. Let me put it this way. I talked to people at practice, like other people who follow the team, and they said the same thing you did, that he looked bad and they're concerned. So I've heard this from enough people, you included, that I respect, to not just dismiss this and say, yeah, maybe the season's going to start, he's just going to be terrible. But I do wonder if part of this is you may have to recalibrate your expectations for how a goalie looks because Hart, and even Ersson to a degree, he's not quite as fundamentally sound as Hart is, but he's very fundamentally sound. These are very fundamentally sound, technically sound goalies. Fedotov might not be that, but it might not matter, because he's just so large.
That's true. And
he might not have to be to still be good, or at least decent.
If he could be like, 45% Dominic Hasek, who always looked completely insane. Every save that he made looked like just, flopping your body around and hoping that it hits something, and every time it worked. If that's the case, all right. I mean, ultimately, if he stops the puck, I don't really care how he does it.
Fair.
It was just that I think because I think everyone was everyone's very focused on him because we don't know what he is.
True.
and what he is important, that I think we are probably like micro-analyzing everything that's happening more than we probably ought to be. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks in the next game.
I don't know. I don't know what he's going to look like when the games matter.
Yeah.
And possibly within 10 games, we're going to realize this guy just can't hack it as an NHL goalie. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm just saying that perhaps you are correct that he doesn't have the kind of technical soundness you would ideally want in a goalie, but perhaps it might not matter that much because he has just such a size advantage over, say, a Carter Hart or even a Sam Ersson, that he's able to be less technically sound and still make most of the saves.
Yeah, I'm not writing him off. I think I just kind of hoped that I would watch him play a game and it would be more like that one period that he played at the start where he got in and he looked fine and he was playing with pads that he never put on before and he had been in North America for 15 minutes and he looked pretty good. And I was like, all right, we got something here. And instead I didn't.
Instead, you saw the same guy that scared you in that second game.
Yeah, right.
I guess the one thing they could theoretically do if he's real bad in like the first 20 games of the year,
call up Alexei,
call up Kolosov, and be like,
doing?
"Yeah, there's an NHL spot available now. Just saying, you want to come?
Yeah,
you can play now.
It's like 13 hours in the future, I think, where you are. So what you doing?
There we go.
You want to come hang?
So hey, you guess it's the Flyers.
Once again,
you can never rule anything out at this stage.
Short-sighted dummy. You could have just stayed here. Already, we would have been saying, maybe we should give Kolosov a look. Like, already. We're not even to the first game of the season yet. And that kid just didn't want to wait. What a dum-dum.
So,
anywho.
Fedotov, we're questioning.
Yeah.
Petersen, we pretty much know is terrible.
Yeah, we know who Cal is.
Eetu Mäkiniemi.
All right.
There might be something there. Now, just to explain for everybody who isn't aware, Mäkiniemi is on a PTO. He's on a professional tryout, so he does not have a contract right now. However, if the Flyers so choose, they could give him a contract at some point in camp or at the end of camp. The obvious reason why he's here is because Kolosov isn't. And the idea is, well, if he dramatically outplays Cal Petersen, NHL teams generally need to use their third goalie at some point during the year.
You're going to have to, yes.
And if Mäkiniemi looks much better than Cal Petersen, then those are your two guys in the AHL, and Mäkiniemi probably is the first guy that comes up if Ersson or Fedotov gets hurt or one of the two guys just stinks. So to me, he's very much in the mix, and I think he was definitely a bright spot from the game last night. Wasn't perfect, but I think showed enough, and he certainly looked better by comparison when you saw what Cal Petersen did. One person who was not a bright spot, the opposite of a bright spot, one might say, Kelly Hinkle. One Ronald Attard.
Enough already.
It was rough. And I say this as someone who has long been...
I know, you've been a Ronnie Attard guy.
A Ronnie Attard guy. I wanted to see him get a real shot at this camp. Going through some of the details, he's no longer waiver exempt, so there is the risk where if you send him through waivers, you might lose him after this performance. I don't know if any NHL team would have any interest in him if they've watched any tape of this game. But he is a big right-handed shooting defenseman with some NHL experience who was taken in the third round, who can skate decently well. Not great, but he's not a liability from a skating standpoint. He's got a big shot. There are some tools there where you think maybe a team might claim him if he hits waivers. So I went into this camp thinking, I wonder how much of a shot they're going to give him. From the start of camp, he was kind of buried, but he got a look in this preseason game. And you're like, all right, this is the opportunity for Ronnie Attard to change the narrative, to catch the attention of the coaches, to make it clear that he should be playing through the end of camp and having a real look at potentially being the number 8 in the starting roster.
Right.
Well, he caught their attention, but not in a good way. In fact, in probably the worst way possible. This was I've seen a lot of guys have bad preseason games. This was like top tier bad preseason game by a guy trying to make the team.
A real doozy. That one turnover was right in front of the Montreal net where it's just him and the other guy, and all he has to do is skate the puck out of the zone or shoot the puck out of the zone
or just kick it to the boards. Do something.
Whatever. Anything but hand it to the other player who then just goes right up and scores a goal. It was very ugly. And it is a bummer because Ronnie Attard is one of those guys. He makes me think of like Phil Myers. Like all of the physical tools are there. Yeah. Everything is there.
He has the physical tools, maybe not as... Phil Myers was a freak. He could skate incredibly well. He was bigger. He was stronger than everyone. But I do agree that Attard has enough physical tools to be an NHL defenseman.
Yeah,
100%.
And he's just not ever putting them all together at once. And it's getting to the point where it's like there's so many guys in this defensive system that I don't know what you do with him at this point. Like, I mean, I guess he can be a phantom forever. That's fine. Go ahead. Knock yourself out. Maybe he gets it together down there, and then maybe a couple of guys get hurt, and he gets another shot to see if he could do something. All right, that's fine. Whatever. But I just don't see a point in continuing to try to make him a thing. Like, I think the ship has sailed. At this point, he's an AHL player. And you put him down there, and if you got to call him up, you got to call him up. I don't think we have to worry about anyone claiming him.
I definitely don't think they have to worry about it. At least not now.
Especially this time of year. Like when everyone's going up and down through waivers, like all of this happening. I feel like every organization probably has a big right-handed shooting defenseman that they're all waiting to try to see if there'll be a thing because everyone's obsessed with big right-handed defensemen. So I don't really think we have to worry about that part. I just don't think you waste a roster spot on a guy that's showing you nothing at this point.
Yeah, and so I don't really think they're going to.
No, it would be crazy if they did. Even as the 7, like there's just no point.
No, not a chance. And I think too, like the reason why I came into this camp intrigued by Attard was because I looked at what they did last year with Igor Zamol, where he was kind of in the same boat. He'd been a prospect with the organization for a while, hadn't kicked the door down, and then suddenly was no longer waiver exempt.
Right.
And they very clearly went into camp. Basically, they didn't say it out loud, but he did not have an incredible camp. He was fine.
Yeah.
He had a fine enough camp, and that was enough because they wanted to see what they had in this kid. That they were high enough on his potential that they wanted to give him a year, and they did not want to risk losing him on waivers. So I thought, all right, Attard's kind of in the same boat.
Logically,
maybe they're going to approach Attard at this camp the same way. Then at the start of camp, when he was paired with, I forget who he was.
Carter Sutherland?
He was paired with Carter Sutherland. He was paired with like guys who have no chance of making the team. No chance of making the team. And that tells you, okay, he's not in their mix. Because John Tortorella and Danny Briere can say all they want that, the lines and pairings, the first day of camp don't matter. They don't matter in the sense that they're not necessarily going to be the lines and pairs in game 1. But they matter in that they show where these guys stand in the hierarchy at the start of camp. Yeah. And Ronnie Attard was very clear from day 1 was not high. And I was a little bit like, well, that kind of sucks. I think higher of Ronnie Attard personally than like Adam Ginning and guys who were in better spots to start camp. And I was thinking, I don't know if I agree with this. Well, if what they've been seeing from him is what we just watched on Monday night, I understand why they're low on him because that version of Ronnie Attard does not look anywhere near like an NHL player. And I like the skill set still, but I agree with you that they're in a position now where he's not making the team. If somebody claims him, Godspeed, have fun with Ronnie Attard. If nobody claims him, he's down in the AHL. This is the last year of his contract, and maybe he plays out the contract and then signs somewhere else. Yeah. Maybe that's where this goes.
It seems like the logical conclusion to the Ronnie Attard story. And honestly, I would be fine with it because it just seems very unlikely to me that at some point he's just going to learn how to play hockey. It just doesn't.
I will say I've seen much better from him. I don't think he's actually this bad. I think this was a really bad game because he has skills. He played games in the NHL last year and he didn't look bad in most of those games. Yeah. He played games when he got signed out of college at the end of that season. He's played NHL games and his numbers in the NHL, I'm going to pull them up for you. 29 NHL games played, 2 goals, 6 points. Underlying metrics, 53.92 expected goal share, 5-on-5. These are pretty good. Now, he was obviously being used in a sheltered third pair role in those games, but did pretty well in those minutes. So I came into the season thinking there might be something there. But regardless of whether there's something there or not, and this is really important to understanding, I think, Tortorella's view of training camp, but also just the organization's view of training camp, while it matters to a degree, where you were drafted, what you've done in the NHL before, if you haven't fully established yourself, but you've played some games, what you did in the AHL. In the end, you have to show up and play well in camp. And if you don't, it's kind of like, sorry, dude, we gave you a shot. It was a fair competition. Yes, Attard started out camp behind the 8 ball, but he could have gotten himself out from under it if he would have went out there last night and in his 15 minutes of play looked real good. Instead, he looked awful, and now he's just confirmed all of the organization's biases about him and what he is and what he isn't.
Yeah.
And now I assume he's out of the mix.
It's a bummer, but them's the breaks.
Thems are the breaks. But you know what's a good break?
What's that, Chuck?
A good break is calling up Empire Today. That is a very, very good break. Because with Empire Today, you get shop at home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a price match guarantee. Look, of course, Empire has copycats. We've all heard the ads so many times. They have people who are trying to be Empire. But the thing is that they can't beat Empire Today on quality, service, and speed, so they only can advertise low-quality products that Empire simply won't carry. Empire Today won't promise the lowest prices because anyone who does that is putting flooring in your home they wouldn't put in theirs. Empire's philosophy is to help you find what you need, not overwhelm you with thousands of choices and substitutes. What Empire leaves out of their selection is as important as what they put in. Empire's product team exhaustively combs through thousands of product samples each year to find the perfect styles. So schedule a free in-home estimate today, and all PHLY Flyers listeners can receive a $350 off discount.
That's a lot.
When they use the promo code PHLY. Restrictions apply. See EmpireToday.com/PHLY for details, and got to do it. 1-800-588-2300 Empire
Today.
Yeah. But that's not all I want to talk to you about. I do also want to talk to you about our good friends at TrueMark Financial. They sponsored our golf tournament. They're truly a great partner. I've gotten to know quite a few members of their team. Great people. And I think one of the reasons why they're so into PHLY is because they're local. They're headquartered in Fort Washington with branches all over the Philadelphia area. I have one within walking distance of my house. So I see TrueMark Financial many times when I'm coming home from this very show.
How about
I go right past it. But why should you switch to a credit union like TrueMark Financial instead of the big bank that you might be banking with? Here's why. Banks are typically for-profit institutions owned by shareholders. They operate with the primary goal of generating profits for their shareholders. Credit unions, on the other hand, they're not-for-profit financial cooperatives owned by their members. So if you live in Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, or Philadelphia County, you're eligible to join. Member benefits include great rates, lower fees, and personalized service. They also provide financial advice to members, personalized financial planning and expertise, learn about goal setting for long-term financial security. TrueMark Financial is also federally insured by the NCUA and is an equal opportunity lender. For more information, visit TrueMark.com/PHLY.
Yes.
Kelly Hinkle.
What up?
We've just gotten done talking about Ronnie Attard.
Yeah.
I have not yet seen an announcement of cuts. I'm going to assume they're not out yet. That might be later tonight, might be as late as tomorrow morning, because really
5 minutes after the show ends.
5 minutes after the show would probably be what's going to happen. So we don't know exactly who's being cut, but what we can talk about is what comes next. So here's a look at the schedule for those who are watching along with us on YouTube. Today or tomorrow, first round of cuts. Now, most likely these are going to be, guys like Carter Southern, Carson Bjarnason.
The obvious
his team has already announced that he's going back to Brandon. We knew that. We knew that they had no chance. We're talking about the juniors guys. We're also probably talking about guys who, might not even be on the Phantoms. Yeah. They might end up in the ECHL playing for Reading. That's probably going to be the first round of cuts. But that will happen either later today or tomorrow. Then Thursday, next pivot point. First home preseason game. They played the New York Islanders, first game at the Wells Fargo Center. I guess this will be the last first preseason game at a place called the Wells Fargo Center.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Last first.
Last first. That's exciting.
So there's that. Then on Saturday, second preseason home game against Boston. And then Sunday, this isn't on the preseason schedule that we have on here, but I will tell you because it's a point that makes them or forces them to make decisions. On Sunday, the 29th, that is the first day of Phantoms training camp. So a lot of the guys who are going to be on the Phantoms that have really no chance of making the team, presumably they will be cut either right after the Saturday game or Sunday morning so they can be there in time for the Sunday Phantoms training camp. So we do have pivot points. We have moments coming where the Flyers are going to have to make cuts. Maybe not quite there yet. But the next week, They're going to be cutting a lot of guys.
That's exciting.
So I feel like this is a good time for us to talk about who still has a shot.
Right.
Ronnie Attard no longer has a shot.
No, he's done so.
It would blow me away he might survive this round of cuts. It's possible.
Maybe.
Because I don't think he's going down to red. He might not get in another game.
No.
They might just have him stick around to skate around with the team and then get cut when Phantoms camp starts.
That's fair, yeah.
But he might not get cut in this round. That said, I would assume after that performance, his chances of making the roster, as you said, they're done so.
Yeah.
There are other players, however, who might not be done so.
Yeah.
And I want to first start out with the forwards. And before we talk about the forwards who are in the mix still, or at least forwards who I think are still in the mix, I want to just take a quick look at the guys who we assume are going to make the team.
Okay.
So this is the NHL forward depth chart right now. Now, you can quibble with some of the lines. I don't know if right now Owen Tippett's been on a line with Frost and Michkov. Maybe that's where he ends up. My guess is eventually they're going to bump him up because I don't think he's looked that great with that trio too much. But these are your lines in theory. You got Tippett. What you have a quibble?
Can I just say that's a good hockey team?
Yeah, it's a good hockey team.
That's a good hockey
You're
team.
liking it.
I like it.
Okay.
That's not a bad hockey team.
It's Kelly Hinkle approved.
That's a good hockey team.
It's a good hockey team.
I want to hear about it. Look at the third line. Like, this is a good hockey team. Nobody tell me otherwise.
All right. So for our listeners who are not watching on YouTube, I'm going to read off the lines. Yeah. The lines that so intrigued one Kelly Hinkle. Line 1, Owen Tippett, Sean Couturier, Travis Konechny. Line 2, Tyson Forrester, Morgan Frost, Matvei Michkov. Yeah. Line 3, Joel Farabee, Scott Lawton, Bobby Brink. Line 4, Noah Cates, Ryan Poehling, Garnet Hathaway. 13th forward, Nick Delorier. And then we have available spot question mark. Because in theory, especially now the Flyers now it's in limbo a bit, but they have deleted the contract of Ryan Johansson. So they have cap space now. They could carry 14 forwards if they want to. They are starting the season out on a 4-game road trip. Usually you take extras on that trip. And if they have the cap space, why not bring an extra guy? So far, they've been lucky with injuries, knock on wood, in camp. But if somebody gets hurt, that could open the door for someone else. That's possible. I don't think there's a scenario where any of these 13 names we have on the board right now aren't on the team.
Okay, that makes me happy. I was actually a little bit concerned that they'd be messing around with Bobby Brink again. But he's looked so good.
He looked really good in the first game.
Right? Yeah.
Really good in the first preseason game. Also, he's no longer waiver exempt.
Right.
So I could envision, we talked about this on the show, I could see a world where he isn't in the starting lineup for game 1.
Okay.
I do not think there is a world where they would waive him because they would immediately lose him.
100%.
He's on a $1.5 million cap hit. Like, someone's claiming that guy.
Yeah.
It's happening. It's a cheap deal. He's a young guy, showed some potential last year. So these are your 13 guys that are making the team.
Yeah. Okay.
There's really a spot for one guy to make this team without pushing some unexpected guy down to the minors. Now, where that guy would play would depend upon who it is. And this is where we're going to get into the guys who I want to talk about. These are, in my mind, the 4 guys who still have a shot to make this team as the 14th forward, but not necessarily the 14th forward in the lineup. It could be the 12th forward. Could be the 9th forward if you're looking at it from a third-line perspective.
Could be.
So these are the 4 guys I'm looking at as likely. And then there's 2 who probably not, but they're still maybe in the mix. So I'm going to name them all, and then we'll go through, namely the first 4.
Okay.
Final 2, whatever, we can pass them by. If they excel on Thursday, we'll give a show to A-Balls or Oscar Eklund. But for now, 4 I want to talk about are Jett Luchanko, Elliott Desnoyers, Olle Lycksell, and Anthony Richard. I think these are your 4 that plausibly have a chance to grab that 14th spot if they indeed do use a 14th forward. So let's start out with the most fun guy. Start out with Jett, the man with the name that essentially says his best characteristic. Jett Luchanko, I think, is still very much in the mix. Now, it's possible that in 5 minutes we're going to get the cuts and he's going to be sent back to juniors and all this is going to be useless. But assuming that doesn't happen, and given how well he's played, I have to think that at the very least they're going to keep him for a lot of camp, if not the entirety of camp. I have to think he's going to stay in the mix because he's earned it. Kelly, what are your thoughts here about one Jett Luchanko?
I'm obsessed with him.
You are obsessed with Jett.
I'm obsessed with him. He has looked so much better than I expected. And like, not at all out of place playing amongst. Now, obviously, this is training camp. You're playing a lot of against a lot of guys that aren't NHL hockey players. But he is not at any point during any action that I have seen him in looked out of place.
I agree.
He has not looked like a child that needs to be sent back to the minors. That said, I firmly believe the Flyers are cowards. They will absolutely not keep him. So that's number one. Number two, going back to that lineup that you had on the screen there. I mean, like, what are we doing here? Are we taking Laughton off center and putting him on a wing and putting Jett on the third line? Because I don't want him on the fourth line, right? So you have to
I would have to assume that's where you play.
So then, so then you're not scratching Laughton. So then who are we taking out? Cates?
Probably. I mean, there's no guarantee that Cates is even going to be in the game one lineup if they decide that they need, bodyguard Nick Delorier to protect Matte.
Of course.
So,
yes,
I mean, I would definitely have Cates at fourth line left wing to start the year. I'm not sure that's what the Flyers are. I would assume that if Luchanko makes the team, they're probably going to bench both Cates and Delorier.
One would hope.
Because I can't envision a world where they bench Hathaway.
Definitely not benching Poehling.
I guess there's a world where they bench Brink. And they say, Brink, you're out of the lineup because we have to have Delorier in the lineup too.
Be so
That's
annoying.
Possible.
Yes.
I wouldn't put it past John Tortorella.
Me neither.
Because then it's like, well, we have an 18-year-old and we have a 19-year-old.
Yeah, gotta have Dad out there.
We need Dad in the lineup to protect them. I could see it. But I do agree that if Luchanko makes this team, he's slotting in on the third line.
Right.
Whether it's between Farabee and Brink, whether maybe they bump Tippett down or something to give him some more support, I don't know. But yeah, I can't imagine that they put Luchanko on this team and then give him 8 minutes as the 4C. He's playing on the third line if he makes it.
So just to clarify for both me and people listening, he can play 9 games without burning a year of his ELC. So he could play 9 and then get sent back to Guelph.
Yes. The Guelph Storm.
The Guelph Storm, who is my understanding are a garbage team, right?
They're not very good.
Not great. Okay, so he could play 9 and then get sent down. I would like to see them give him the 9.
Okay. That's where your head's at right now.
Just to see. Because at that point, it will be full NHL speed, games that matter, full NHL competition, no more babying. Like, this is the real deal. This is the show. It would be kind of cool, given how good he's looked in all of the situations he's been in so far, to see what he looks like in the actual NHL against actual NHL players. I would like to see it just because he's looked so good.
I think it would be fun.
I don't think they're going to do it.
So here's what I will say about my understanding of, and when I say the Flyers thinking, I want to make this clear. This is my understanding of the Flyers front office thinking.
Okay.
I think John Tortorella is like full fan WIP caller type where he's just like, no, show me the shiny new toy and show me the shiny new toy right now. I think John Tortorella, assuming, and I'll get into this in a minute, assuming Luchanko continues to look this good, John Tortorella is going to go into Danny Brière's office at the end of camp and say, I want this guy on my team.
John, my boy.
But what I will say about Danny and the rest of the front office is that they, from my understanding, are not big fans of the 9-game audition. Their view is that while there might be some benefit to getting a taste and seeing what it's like in the NHL pace, they think it messes up that guy's entire year because they think that it means he's not going through camp with his junior team, is not going through the start of the year. And this is the big thing, they think that it takes the guy usually at least a couple weeks, if not a month, to kind of get over the disappointment of no longer being in the NHL. They think that it really messes with that transition period. And usually, like by November or December, they're fine. They're back to where they were. But they believe that for most prospects, it messes with their season because then they spend 2 weeks kind of pouting a little bit of like, I was just in the NHL. I'm not going to do this junior thing again.
What if you give him 9 and he looks so good that he's not going back to Guelph?
Well, then that's another thing.
That could happen.
I guess it's possible. He could be a boat.
Who was the last guy the Flyers gave 9 and then sent back? Laughton?
Well, they did to Laughton. I think Laughton may have been the last.
He seems fine.
But it took him a while. Remember, his development got kind of messed up for a while.
Well,
they had to send him back down to the AHL to recalibrate.
Yeah, they had to. Well, they wanted to coach him out of thinking that he was going to be a top 6 player, I think is what was happening there. Yeah,
I agree.
Which I don't think is going to be the case with Jett. I don't know. It would just.
I'm just telling. I'm not even saying I agree. I'm just telling you this is what my understanding of the organization's thinking is that. And it's what I don't think they love the idea of a 9-game audition.
So that begs the question then, in the triumvirate, how strong is John Tortorella's vote? Like, if he says, I want this kid for 9 games, are Danny and Jonesy willing to say, no, dude, we're not giving it to you? That's going to be interesting.
And the thing that's tough about it, and I mentioned this, I think I mentioned it on the show on Monday, I believe. It's not just that they would be saying no to Torts. They would be saying no to the team. Because the thing is, and this is important, it's an important part of the dynamic here. The NHL guys are seeing what we're seeing.
Yeah, of course.
They are seeing that this kid can play. And I guess I'll say it now. The caveat to all this is if he goes out there on Thursday and looks like crap because the competition's better, then it's easy. Yeah. Then it's like, okay, he's not ready. He looked real good for rookie camp and the start of main camp, and now he hit the wall. All good. Have your big year in Guelph and come up next year and make the team. That's fine. But if the rest of camp, he still is performing the way he performed on Sunday, like the guys on the NHL team see that. And it's real hard for Danny to go into that room and say, you know he's an NHL player. I know he's an NHL player, but sorry, you can't have him. That is tough. Not saying they can't do it. They did it with Sean Walker. Yeah. They basically said, sorry guys, we know you're in a playoff push, but we're taking away one of your best defensemen.
Right.
So they will do it. They do have the stones to do it, but it is harder. And it's also harder when you have John Tortorella saying, no, this guy's my best option at 3C. Let me keep it.
And also, it's hard as a fan to watch Matvei Michkov and not just want to push the pedal to the floor immediately.
You're right.
And say, let's effing go.
Yeah.
Especially because a lot of people were not happy with that pick.
The Luchanko
pick. We're not happy about it. And even if you weren't unhappy about it, I do think that most people were like, I don't know. I guess we're going to see what happens with this one. Yeah, we'll see. It could be. I don't know. But, like, I don't think anyone's watching him. And if you had a question about that pick, like, there's no way you have a question about that pick anymore. Now you're like, oh, they might have had a steal at 13.
People are excited about Jett
Luchanko
now.
And so it's really hard to think about pulling that back for a whole season just because of like prudence and responsibility. Like that's
Who does that?
No, I don't want any of that in my sports. I want only nonsense. I don't know. I just want to have maximum fun, and this would be the maximum fun choice. But as you said, I would be surprised if he's kept for the 9 games.
I came into this camp thinking there was essentially no chance.
Yeah. I mean, so did I.
I now think the door is open, and not just a crack, not fully open, but it's open like a wedge.
Yeah,
you're seeing a little triangle there. You know, it's
like when you don't lock the door in the bathroom and your cat or dog starts to push their nose in, and you just like see the nose coming through the crack in the door, and then he's just got to push it in. He's got 2 games. He's got to push the door open.
Yeah. And John Tortorella did say, I believe it was this weekend, he said, I'm looking forward to seeing Luchanko in games, plural. He's only played 1. So the assumption is he's going to get one of these home games, if not both.
Hopefully both.
And we shall see. We shall see if he can continue to make this decision very tough for the Philadelphia Flyers brain trust.
Yeah.
Next up on the forward list, Elliott Desnoyers, who I believe he is having a significantly better camp than he did last year when he was actively bad. And that was a camp
actively bad.
That was a camp he came into with a real chance to make the team, and he flopped. Yeah. He looked terrible, and he ended up having a real bad AHL year. I think he has looked fine in this camp.
Yeah.
I cannot go as far as to say I think he has looked great, maybe not even good. I feel like fine for me is the word I would use for Desnoyers.
He can still be waived, right?
Yes, he is still waiver exempt.
In that case, he's going. Like, I don't know what the point. There's no one. He has not played well enough to push anybody off that roster that you put up on the screen.
Okay.
And there's no point to him sitting in the press box.
I agree with that.
So you might as well like think to yourself, okay, He's taken a little bit of a step, looks better than last year.
Progress positive.
In the right direction. Let's send him back to Allentown. Hopefully he has a monster season. And if we need a call-up, he should be one of the first guys. And that's a good thing to have.
Right.
I am still a Desnoyers believer. I still want him to be a thing. I don't know what that thing is, and I don't know if he'll ever be it. But I do think that he has done well enough. Unlike Attard, like with Attard, I'm like, it's written off. Like, I'm done with you. Yeah. This guy has done well enough that I think he still deserves to be in the conversation. And I think that he still deserves to have a place high enough on the depth chart that we're still talking about him.
Okay.
Like, but he needs to go to the AHL because he needs to play. Like, he can't sit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about what they've done to Desnoyers this camp is that it seems like they are playing him more in the role that I think he's going to play if he does make it to the NHL. Like, they used him at center a lot in his first 2 pro years. Basically, from the jump at this camp, he's been at wing. And I think that is an acknowledgement that he's probably a wing at the NHL level. Yeah. Last night, he was on a line. He was on the 4th line. He was on a line with Gauthier and Delorier. And while he didn't produce much offensively, one thing I liked about Desnoyers in last night's game was that this is coming after Thursday, the bag skate, Friday, Saturday, doing heavy scrimmages. Sunday, Monday, he was skating, or Sunday, he was skating because he wasn't in the game group. That team on Monday was tired. They were clearly fatigued because they've gone through the Torts Hell camp. He was a guy who I thought had jumped pretty much all game. He was forechecking, he was skating well, he was active, he was doing things. And I like that. I like the fact that he still had energy. That tells me that he's in good shape.
Yes.
And that tells me that he has the right mentality at this camp as opposed to last camp. I do agree with you, though, that I don't see a point to keeping as the 14th forward, and he has not played well enough to push out any of the guys on the roster in the lineup.
Right.
So in that case, unless you just want to reward him by taking him along with you on the 4-game road trip, getting him in a game and sending him back, I don't really see why you would have him on the team to start the year.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe you could do that. It's always nice to have an extra actually good player when you're on that kind of road trip. I mean, actually good relative to, like, Nick Delorier. But I don't know. It just makes sense to me to send him down to start the year. And he's, one of the first guys that you're calling up when the injuries inevitably happen.
Kelly, it would indeed be nice to have a good extra in your lineup. But you know what's also really nice to have? A really good pharmacy.
Oh, I love a good pharmacy.
Very, very nice to have a good pharmacy. And if you're looking for a pharmacy that provides convenience and reliability, why not choose Rite Aid? With a My Pharmacy account, you can refill your prescription, schedule a vaccine, get personalized care recommendations, sign up for prescription notifications. Now, all you need to get started is a prescription at Rite Aid. So get started at riteaid.com/mypharmacy. Rite Aid will also refill your prescriptions automatically if you enroll in automated courtesy refills. It's free, it's easy, and most prescriptions qualify. So talk with your Rite Aid pharmacist, or again, sign up through your My Pharmacy account at riteaid.com. Restrictions may apply. You also can get all of your prescriptions at the same time with one-trip refills. So ask your pharmacist, your Rite Aid pharmacist, of course, to sync your medication so you can pick them up in one visit, and you can sync with other family members too. Just ask your local Rite Aid pharmacist to get started. Again, restrictions may apply. And finally, you can manage your prescriptions with the Rite Aid mobile app, which you can download from the Apple App Store or Google Play. So transfer your prescriptions to Rite Aid today. Just go to riteaid.com/transfer. Rite Aid's caring pharmacists are always ready to answer your questions and help you stay healthy. So get your prescriptions along with anything at Rite Aid you may need, including over-the-counter medicines, household products, cosmetics, and more. Just ask your pharmacy team for details. Restrictions apply. And finally, another one of our great partners here at PHLY, Ace Hardware.
Oh!
Got a leaky pipe? At Ace Hardware Home Services, we're around the block with everything you need to fix it, including the person to do the fixing. Maybe you have an air conditioning issue. We have maybe a couple more hot days left in the year before we get into full-on chill. We got a person for that too. What if you have a faucet you said you fixed last fall? We got a person for that too, because Ace is not just the helpful hardware folks. They're also the helpful home service and repair folks. From plumbing to heating and cooling, they have the trusted pros to keep your home humming all year long. Ace Hardware Home Services. they're bringing Helpful home. Helpful you love from the store now to your front door. So visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at www.acehardwarehomeservices.com to get started on your next project. Because, Kelly, of course, Ace is the place with the Helpful hardware folks.
That's true.
Now let's get back to forwards. We've gotten done Elliott Desnoyers. We waxed poetic about Jett. Now we are on to the third of our 4 forwards we are discussing. Olle Lycksell.
Olle
Lycksell. He's interesting because I think he's in a different place than Desnoyers.
Agreed.
For a couple reasons.
Yes.
Number one, he's older. He's 25 years old. Number two, this is important. He's no longer waiver exempt.
Yep.
So you do risk losing him if you send him through waivers. Number three, I don't think he qualifies really as a prospect anymore.
No.
So I wouldn't have a problem if they were to take him along on a trip or on the roster as the 14th forward and just let him hang around. I don't think he's had an incredible camp. He scored a goal in Sunday's game, but he was iffy the rest of the game. Monday, he was playing in a back-to-back after the Tortel camp, so just the fact that he didn't collapse on the ice, I consider a win. But I don't think he's been incredible. Kelly, what are your thoughts?
So I'm kind of on the same page. My thought is that he's a guy that I don't really mind having parked in the press box. Because like you said, I don't know that there's a lot of development to happen here. I think he's the guy.
Right.
So perhaps, you know, if we're saying that he's cooked, he's all done, we can take him out of the oven. Maybe he benefits from practicing with the NHL team, being with Torts, maybe getting a game if someone gets, you know, a little bit banged up on one of these games on this road trip. I would be totally fine with that. So that is interesting only because while I'm not like super high on him, and I definitely don't see a situation in which he pushes anybody out of the lineup, I do think that if they want to carry a 14th, he's the perfect candidate for a 14th forward.
I also don't know how much more he has to prove in the AHL. He's already basically, he's established himself.
Yeah, he is this guy.
He's a point per game guy in the AHL. He's a really good AHL forward.
Right.
Can he play in the NHL? He has played in the NHL. He is not stuck.
No.
Is he maybe this year's version of Yegor Zamula? Where it's like, well, I guess it's shit or get off the pot time. Like, he's got to be in the NHL, and let's see what we have in him.
Yeah, he could be. I just... How without an injury, how many games is he playing? I don't think there's very few. Very few.
But the thing is it's the NHL. There's always injuries.
That's true. Yeah. And I feel like if you're going to go the 14th forward, he's the only guy that makes sense to me as a 14th forward for all the reasons you've listed.
Okay.
I don't think there's any reason for him to be in the AHL. I don't think there's any harm in him sitting in the press box for a little while. And maybe he benefits from just being with the NHL team. Like, that to me is like textbook. All right, you can sit in the press box and we'll see what happens. But like, either way, I don't really care. Like,
he's just not that important anymore.
He's just like a guy. Like, he's a guy. He's like really like the platonic ideal of just a guy. And so if we have him and he gets a game or two, all right, that's fine. He'll probably be fine. If he never plays, all right, that's fine. Whatever. I think
Lycksell has a lot of fans, understandably, and I get it. He has a lot of fans from the people that follow the Phantoms very closely because he pops for the Phantoms. And the idea is, why don't the Flyers ever give him a real shot? And by a real shot, I mean like 3 weeks of just playing in the top 9 and see what he is.
No, but because he's Boyd Kane. There is a difference between being a really, really, really good AHL hockey player and being a good NHL hockey player. Like, those things don't necessarily translate one for one.
Fair.
There are a lot of guys that have sick careers in the AHL, long careers, really good careers, lots of points, lots of all-star appearances. They're really good AHL hockey players that never have more than a cup of coffee in the NHL because they're just not that next level of good. And I think Lycksell might be one of those guys. He's just not, he doesn't have that next level. He's like quad A. That's what he is.
That is the concern. That was my same concern about David Kasha years ago.
Right, yeah.
Lycksell has a similar feel, except with a bit more offensive talent. I like Lycksell, but I do lean more on your side that he might just be a really good AHL player, but I would be fine if they use him as the 14th forward.
That would be fine. And honestly, if you follow the Phantoms closely and you're a Phantoms fan and you go to games in Allentown all the time, I mean, obviously you're going to like a guy like Lycksell. You want good players on your hockey team.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. I had a lot of favorite players when the Phantoms were in Philadelphia that were never going to make the NHL, but they were sick AHL hockey players. That's cool. The Phantoms need to win games too. They need good players too. If Lycksell ends up being a career AHL guy, a perennial all-star for the Phantoms, like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's still good, but I just don't see in him enough of a consistent next level that warrants giving him a permanent spot on the Flyers for any length of time, barring enough injuries.
Barring a lot of injuries.
Cracks the lineup.
And that might be what has to happen. He needs to get some, I don't want to say luck, because it's not lucky if guys get hurt, but he needs things to break his way to get an extended look in a scoring role, and then he needs to take full advantage of it. He needs to score points, he needs to be impactful, and then he can carve out a spot for himself. But until then, I don't think a spot is going to be carved out for him. Closing this out with the other forward who might be, and I don't want to rip on this guy because he actually looked like a pretty fun player in last night's game, but he's probably like the boring 14th forward pick.
Tony Rick.
Danny Briere, before camp, specifically mentioned him, Anthony Richard, as a guy who is in the mix for a spot. He played 9 games last year for the Boston Bruins.
Yeah.
He's played in the NHL before. He's played 24 games total. He's 27 years old. To me, it's the profile of a quad A guy.
Yeah.
However, it is worth noting that last night he played on a line with Tyson Forrester and Sean Couturier. That tells me he's a guy they are giving a real look to as potentially this, we're going to take you on trips and you're going to be the 14th forward for us kind of guy.
Seems like he's got wheels, huh?
He can skate.
Yeah.
He's always been a speedster.
Yeah, so I mean, that's cool. Yeah, he's another guy that's like a perfect candidate for a 14th forward in that there's nothing left to find out about him. He's 27 years old. This is what he is.
Yeah.
He's obviously, I don't think they brought him here to send him down to the Phantoms. Like, that doesn't seem like what he's, I mean, I guess he could be, but
I think they brought him to be, I don't want to use the words organizational depth because it's more than that, but he's a guy where he's going to get a look in camp. If he makes it, great. If he doesn't, he goes to the AHL and he's one of our obvious call-up guys. I think that was what he was signed to be.
I mean, if I'm choosing between him or Lycksell as the 14th forward, I don't know if it's just because Lycksell's been here and so he's like a guy that we've brought along.
We're invested in him a bit.
Yeah, like I would kind of rather see him take the opportunity and turn it into something rather than this guy who I don't know, who just came from Boston and he's not from here.
Right.
Like, that said, he is, of course, a perfect 14th forward because, again, nothing to find out about him, no development to be had. He could just hang out with the NHL team, and if they need a warm body on the ice, there he is.
Yeah.
And if it ends up being him, cool. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you, bud.
So I think these are your 4. Then you have Abols and Eklund, the 2 guys they signed from the Swedish Hockey League this past summer. I think they've both showed flashes. Some people legitimately liked Eklund's play last night. He didn't pop too much to me, but I did see some scattered voices on Twitter saying they liked him. Sure. Abols has been playing center. They do need centers, although I don't know where they would quite fit a center here. But if maybe he's a call-up if a center gets hurt, if they don't want to move Cates back over to the middle, because they could do that too. If like a Lawton were to get hurt for a month, they could move Cates back in the middle. Maybe they call up old Rodrigo and he takes that spot. But I don't get the sense that either of those 2 are poised to bang the door down. But hey, as 14th forwards, I guess they could be options too. They're both pros. They're both on the older side. Maybe they could.
Am I remembering correctly? Did Abols play in the rookie game?
I do not believe he did.
I'm mixing him up with somebody else.
I don't believe either of them did, no.
Yeah, that makes sense because they're not children.
Rizzo played in the rookie game.
Yeah, okay.
He's not on this list for a reason. I don't think he's been terribly impressive.
Makes sense to me for those guys to be Phantoms.
I would say at least to start.
Yeah.
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
So now let's move quickly. We don't have a lot of time left in the show, but let's move quickly to the defense. And I think we can run through the defense pretty quick because while it's possible that they keep an 8th defenseman, it strikes me as less likely that they keep 8 versus 14 forwards. And maybe they'll only keep 13 forwards and 7 D-men and go with a 22-man roster. They don't have to have a 23-man. But the possibility's open, especially because now Johansson's contract has been, per Danny Briere, it's been terminated. Yeah. So they could. They have the cap space without tapping into long-term injured reserve. But before we get into that, let's just take a look at what the defense looks like right now. We got York Sanheim as your projected first pair. You got Nick Seeler, Jamie Drysdale as your projected second. You have Yegor Zamula and Rasmus Line as your third. That was your first pair last night.
Charlie, it's a good hockey team.
It's a good hockey team.
It's not bad.
It's not a bad hockey team.
It's not bad. On paper,
Not bad. Pretty good. And then your 7 is Eric Johnson, who is the professional best friend.
Dad, yeah.
He's the dad, the best friend. He's making the team. These 7, they're all making the team. I guess there is a world where Ristolainen could be traded before camp ends. I don't think it's happening.
Feels unlikely, but maybe.
I think that even if they have aims on trading him, teams are going to need to see him stay healthy for a couple months before they make a move.
Like one NHL, like one regular season game he will need to play.
Just one single regular season game.
Just one single regular, yeah. Mm-hmm.
As for Zamula, in a world where Matvei Michkov is not on this team, maybe you think, maybe Andre could push him out. In a world where he is Matvei Michkov's actual best friend, yeah, he's playing. He's on this team and he's playing.
Has made himself indispensable.
Yes.
He has earned himself a job for as long as he wants one. Good for you, buddy. It pays to speak Russian.
Yes.
I've been saying that.
So now we have theoretically one available spot. And I think there are 4 names that maybe could be in the mix here.
Yeah.
I'm removing Ronnie Attard after last night's debacle. I haven't seen much of anything from Helge Grans. I don't think he's realistically in the mix. So there's 4 guys. And I'm going to read off the names, and then we're going to go through them real quick. We got Emil Andrae. We got Adam Ginning. We got Hunter McDonald. And then we have Oliver Bonk.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with Emil Andrae, Andrae is the guy where it seems like out of this group, he's at the top of the chart. He skated with Eric Johnson to start camp. He was with Grans in Sunday's preseason game. He played through rookie camp. It does seem like they like him a lot. However, I don't think he's playing well enough to knock, say, Zamula out of the lineup.
No.
Although Zamula actually looked pretty good last night. The pairing with him and Risto looked fine.
Yeah.
And Andrae has been uneven. I thought he was pretty good on Sunday. Yeah. Wasn't flashy, but was fine. He was good. His underlying numbers were great. That tells me he was making small, good plays, but he wasn't jumping off the screen, or I was there, so jumping out of my seat to watch him do cool things. He was fine.
Yeah.
And he doesn't make sense for me to keep him as the 8.
No, I agree. You want to thank diehards?
Yes, we will thank the diehards. Although I don't really know the wording for that. So I'm going to say thank you for being diehards. It's great. Man. I usually leave this in the bill. Thanks for being a diehard. You should all subscribe to be a diehard. Read my articles. I read it.
100%. They're really good.
Cool.
Worth every penny.
Worth every penny.
Of the $6 per month.
Awesome. Andrae, I would say he has to be in the lineup to be on this team.
Yes.
I don't think he is unless they have designs on rotating him and Zamula. And honestly, I think Zamula's been better so far.
I think so too. I think that Andrae needed to, as we say over and over again, beat the door down.
Yeah.
I think he really needed to make it impossible for them to send him down. And he's been fine, but he's not done that.
Here is one thing I do want to point out, though. And we are making some sweeping generalizations because it's a show and it's in the here and now. This is how we see these guys. It's worth noting that Bobby Brink didn't start his awesome camp that ended with him earning a job until the 3rd preseason game. It took a bit. And then once he got rolling, he was killing it.
Interesting.
So it is plausible that it's to say Emil Andrae is in the lineup on Thursday and he scores 2 goals and looks awesome. There is still the possibility that he or someone else could go on a late camp surge like Brink did.
That's true.
So we can't rule that possibility out. But I do agree that right now, I don't think Andrae has done enough to have the Flyers say that he has to be on this team.
Yeah, but and you make a fair point because he's also not done enough for them to say no, definitely not.
Exactly. He hasn't pulled an Attard.
Yeah, he's 100% on the bubble.
So he's still in the mix.
Could be.
Still in the mix. Another guy who's in the mix, I do believe, is Adam Ginning.
Another guy I'm tired.
They like Adam Ginning. I think it's interesting, though, with Adam Ginning that Ronnie Attard was a Chuck Fletcher, Brent Flair draft pick.
Right.
He was taken in their first draft in 2019. Whereas Adam Ginning was a Ron Hextall draft pick. He was taken in the final Hexy draft.
When was that, 17 years ago? Like, enough already with Adam Jennings.
2018. That was the Joel Farabee draft.
Why are we still on this guy?
Joel Farabee, Jay O'Brien draft. Don't forget about Jay. Point being is that
tell me why we're still talking about
they like Adam Jennings.
What do they like about him?
They like the physicality. They like the defensive acumen, and they think he can be a decent NHL. They liked what they saw from him in March of last year when he came up in all the injuries. They think he looked fine. And I think he's still in the mix. I think he's a long shot, but I think he's still in the mix. I just think it's interesting that he has seemingly jumped Attard in the organization's estimation, despite the fact that they drafted Attard and they didn't draft Jennings. I think that speaks to how far Attard has fallen in their estimation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Adam Jennings sounds like a good piece for a trade package.
I just don't think anybody wants him.
Of course not. That's what I'm saying. You're making my point for me. Nobody cares about Adam Jennings.
Yeah, he's the new Robert Haig.
Exactly.
Haig in a third.
Exactly. Yeah, Adam Jennings in a third for every trade.
For everyone. For Trevor Zegras.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Anaheim, get it done.
Connor McDavid.
So there's Adam Jennings. I don't sense a lot of buzz around him right now, but I do think he is still theoretically in the mix. I don't think they would keep him as the 8 just to bring him on a trip.
Right.
I think they feel he could use more development.
Sure.
But he's not young. He was drafted in 2018. So maybe they say, sure, you're all you're going to be. You're an 8. Next guy, who is definitely not someone who they think is done developing, but they love him.
This is an interesting.
Hunter McDonald.
So I got to tell you, as we've said on this show 100 times, I couldn't understand why Hunter McDonald was being made a thing in my life. I didn't understand why I was hearing about him so much. I didn't understand why I had to think about him or what. I went to that game in Allentown with you guys. I thought he looked great. Okay. It was a rookie game against a bunch of rookies. However, I was like, oh, there's something there.
There's something there. It's the same thing I said after development camp.
Also, I expected him to be like a monster physically. He just looks like a normal hockey player to me. Like, he doesn't look...
Really? I think he looks big.
Does he look big?
Maybe you saw him closer than I did.
Maybe it's just because all those Rangers kids were so large.
They are a very big team.
They're freakishly
They're
large
quite
kids.
large.
So maybe that's what it was.
6'6", 6'7" guys.
But I think I remember him being on the ice with Oliver Bonk enough and thinking to myself, they look like they're the same size. And I thought that Hunter McDonald was supposed to be an enormous beast of a man.
He is larger than Oliver Bonk.
I guess that maybe just like visually, it might have just been because of the Rangers kids being freaks. But I walked away from that game thinking like, all right, I kind of get it.
And get behind this.
I could see something with this kid. That said, I don't know who on that 6-man roster he pushes off.
Well, there's one obvious guy I think he is designated to replace at some point.
Yeah, but that guy's still here.
But that guy's still here. That is one Rasmus Salainen.
He is a guy, despite the fact that I do think that if they are as high on him as they seem to be, it would probably make sense for him to be getting regular time in the AHL. That said, I could see him being a rotation with Zamula.
Okay.
Just because they're so high on him. I think he's looked pretty good in this camp. Like, I don't recall any moments of him being an abject disaster. He's actually, for the most part, looked better than I expected him to look. So I could see them rotating. I just don't know, with Igor Zamula being the professional best friend, like, do they want to rotate out Igor Zamula?
I don't think it would be the end of the world.
Yeah, all right.
And they do really like Hunter McDonald.
Yes,
obviously. It's abundantly clear.
We've been hearing about him
They love this guy.
Yes.
I think what I've been intrigued with Hunter McDonald is that I came into main camp especially, and even rookie camp, the second rookie game especially. I was expecting a guy who was essentially perfect defensively, that he was just wiping out guys, great rush defense, physical, monster in front of the crease, everything like that. And he's made more defensive mistakes than I want to see.
That's fair.
But on the flip side of that, I expected essentially nothing of him with the puck. And he's been significantly better than I expected in doing things with the puck. He's carried the puck up ice a few times on rushes. Yeah. He's made mostly good passes. So I'm wondering if this is just fluky. Maybe he's making some mistakes defensively because it's his first NHL camp and actually he is this defensive stud. Or maybe there's a little bit something more to Hunter where he's maybe not the defensive dominator they think he is, but he might have more to him. He might contain multitudes, potentially.
I wouldn't hate that. I mean,
he's intriguing.
At this point, I at least am now on board with the idea that he could be a thing.
The idea of Hunter McDonald.
Before, when it was just like, all right, he's big. Like before, it was just like, oh God, Keith Jones just wants another large defenseman. That's all this is. That's why we're talking about him. But he actually kind of looks, not bad.
Not bad.
So if they are obsessed with him and he is a guy that they want to give a little bit of time by rotating in, I would be okay with it. That said, if they really want him to be a fixture in the NHL, he probably should go play with the Phantoms.
I think his development would benefit more from him spending 2 months in the AHL at least.
Can I just
and
say,
then going from there? As
an aside, I would feel a lot better about all of this if we had a good coach in the AHL.
Oh.
I just don't.
Yeah, you don't have any faith in Lappy.
No, I worry about like how much development are we getting out of these kids playing for Ian LaPerriere? I know he's really nice and everybody likes him and all that kind of stuff, but like for example, if Brad Shaw was the Phantoms coach and we were sending guys down there to develop, I'd feel very good about the idea that they're going to go down there and they're going to learn some good habits and they're going to come back better players than we sent them. I don't have that kind of confidence with Ian LaPerriere's Phantoms.
All I can say is the Flyers
I know they love him. I know.
I think I suspect that if you hook them up to lie detectors, they would probably acknowledge that they could do better in terms of like an X's and O's winning games Phantoms coach. But I think they honestly do believe that Lappy is a good developer of talent. They believe that.
Well, who am I to tell them they're wrong?
I'm just saying.
I just talk about it.
And then real quick before we go, Oliver Bonk. It's not time. I don't see it being his time. No. He has not done what Luchanko has done and popped.
Yes. And I would have loved for that not to be the case. Like, especially with the monster year that he had in London, it would have been really cool for him to come in here and do like Luchanko's done and been like, now I'm ready.
Yeah.
But he absolutely has not. So
I don't think he's been bad.
No.
He just hasn't popped.
He's not. I have not once watched him and been like, yes, that's an NHL hockey player. Like, he needs some time to cook. And given the potential that he has, I would rather they cook him than rush him in any way, shape, or form. So
I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
Before we leave, got to go through the Super Chats.
Woo!
Gary B is first up. Haha, Kelly, we are wearing the same Pearl Jam shirt today. Look at that. Attard is not waiver exempt. Correct, Charlie? Correct. He is no longer waiver exempt. If they send him down to the minors, which at this point seems close to a formality, he would theoretically be available to be claimed, but I do not think anyone is going to claim.
He's exempt in the sense that no one's going to claim.
I can't rule out the possibility. Again, he is a big right-handed shooting defenseman who can skate and has a good shot. Everyone has one at home. It's possible someone could be intrigued.
Maybe.
This last performance didn't help his case.
Nah.
Next up, Hat Trick Patrick. What did you think of Mäkiniemi? I'd heard very little of him before this game. I was surprised he looked pretty good, puck handling aside. We talked about it a little bit earlier. I think we're on the same page. And he also benefited from the direct comparison to Cal Petersen, who looked terrible.
In a 30-minute split between the two of them, all of a sudden now he's the third goalie in the defense or in the depth chart. So good for you.
There we go. Nicholas Hankins is up next. Does Ronnie Attard have trade value? No. I mean, if we think he's going to clear waivers without being claimed, then he has no trade value.
Although you package him with a third. You never know.
You never know.
Attard in a third.
You never know. But no, Nick, I like your thinking, but I cannot imagine he has actual trade. The most you would get for him would be something like the trade they made with Wade Allison, where like you're trading Wade Allison for another Wade Allison.
Yeah.
That's about it. Next up, Adam S. If Jett keeps playing well, he deserves to make the team. Looks better than Coots, Lawton, and Paling as of now. Okay, look.
Let's not get wild.
Let's not get carried away here. Yes, Coots, Lawton, and Paling, I wouldn't say any of them looked amazing last night. They're also veterans who are using this. They're using this camp as a way to play themselves back into rhythm, back into feeling like they're playing at NHL levels.
Right.
Jett is trying to impress.
Exactly.
They are trying to prepare for the NHL season.
Right.
So let's not try to say that Jett is actually the best center on this roster right now.
No. Probably not.
Let's just not go too far at him. But respect you wanting to keep Jett as long as he's playing well. Next up, Gary B. Charlie, did they hire Simmer as a Canadian scout? They did hire him. it was not as a scout. He's going to kind of be an ambassador, do some off-ice stuff. I'm sure he'll provide some input.
Professional best friend to us, the fans.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, perfect job for Wayne Simmonds. We all love him.
Love the fact that they brought him officially back into the fold.
Me too. I love it.
I mean, I wish he would have been able to retire a Flyer, but now he's very much a Flyer for life. And if anybody deserves it, it's that guy.
100%.
He laid his, body on the ice for his team for years. Next up, Adam S. Also, there's no evidence that letting guys develop down in juniors makes them better. I don't think so. So, Adam, I don't think it's that there is a hard, fast rule. And I don't think there's ever going to be a hard, fast rule. So if you're trying to do analyses about we looked at 500 players and this is the most likely outcome, that's never going to be the way development works. Development is going to be different for every guy. Some guys might benefit from going down to juniors and developing their offensive game more. Some guys might benefit from getting thrown to the wolves right away. It depends on the person. It depends on so many things about them. And that's why I think every developmental plan needs to be specialized to the player. And so I don't like the idea of there's no evidence. There's never going to be any evidence because you're never going to be able to do a kind of analysis of a one-size-fits-all developmental approach.
Also, you're only sending him back to Guelph because you have to. You can't send him to the AHL.
Well, I'm guessing Adam is arguing that they should keep him in the NHL all season long.
I mean, if they keep him for 9 games and he looks like he belongs, then yeah, sure. Right. But I think that you really need to see those 9 games before, even me, I need to see those 9 games before I'm deciding that he stays forever. But I don't think that you're sending him back to Guelph because you think that's the best for his development. I'm sure that if they could send him to Allentown, that's where they would send him. That would be better. It's a step up competition-wise. Right. But they can't because of that dumb rule.
Yeah, not allowed, unfortunately. Right. And the final question, Linden49, my hats is off for Torts for what he did for Guy Gaudreau. We talked about this yesterday. I did my post-practice notes video mostly on it. For those who don't know, Torts gave Guy Gaudreau, the father of Johnny and Matt Gaudreau, a call a few weeks ago, asked if he wanted to participate in practice as a coach. So yesterday he was on the ice with the Flyers. It was a really nice thing for Torts and the entire Flyers organization to do. So I feel like Torts, especially in maybe the online corner of the Flyers fan base, is a bit of a divisive figure. I think we all can agree, though, that was an objectively really nice thing that he did.
It made me cry, actually.
For Guy Gaudreau.
I cried when I saw it. It's easy to forget because he makes it easy that John Tortorella is actually a very sweet man. And I think at his core, he's a very sweet man. And this was just one of those things.
I think it's the distinction between, they both treat players very harshly, but it's the distinction between John Tortorella and Mike Babcock, where John Tortorella, yes, he can be an asshole, but it's coming from a place of caring.
Yes.
Whereas Mike Babcock, when he's a jerk, it's coming from a place of just being a jerk.
Right. Yes.
I think that's the distinction.
And Lyndon's right. It was a very nice thing to do. And I do hope that, obviously, it's not going to solve any of the problems that Guy Gaudreau has.
No.
But I'm hoping that it was and that it continues to be. I hope that he continues to hang around. That it's a nice distraction for him. And it's an opportunity to feel a little something familiar.
Maybe for an hour he was able to just smile a little bit and it not be forced.
Exactly.
And that's a great
nice
thing.
Yes.
Well, that, Kelly, is all the time we have today for you on PHLY Flyers. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on whatever podcast listening channel, Apple, Spotify, all of them.
Yeah, all the things.
Please do that if you don't already do that. We will be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Kelly and I again for part 2 of the Charlie Kelly Show experience to break down what will probably be the official announcement of cuts. And then we'll see where the roster stands.
All right.
Well, thanks again. See you tomorrow.
We all silly like the mayor.